The horses could no longer move forward. It was something no warrior of the Golden Horde had ever experienced before. No armies, no walls, no arrows falling from the sky, no catapults raining stones. Just the ground. And the ground was swallowing them, sucking down their hooves, their legs, turning every single step into a desperate fight just to stay alive. It was 1321, and 20,000 Mongol warriors were dying in the marshes of the Irpen River, just a few miles northwest of Kiev. The formation had collapsed minutes ago. What started as a disciplined cavalry advance unraveled into pure panic when the first horses sank up to their knees in the dark mud. The flanks tried to divert. The archers tried to pull back, but there was nowhere to go. The terrain had them trapped front, back, sides, all at once. Every direction they tried looked like an escape route until they hit it and realized more mud, more waterlogged earth, more ground that wouldn't support the weight of a single horse. And there stood the Lithuanians, holding firm, positioned on solid ground, attacking an enemy that couldn't even move, let alone mount a response. It wasn't a battle. It was a geographical slaughterhouse. But how? How does a smaller army destroy 20,000 Mongol cavalrymen? The kind of force that swept from China to Poland, burned Moscow, reduced Kiev to ashes just 80 years before. How did a Lithuanian Grand Duke leading a principality that barely existed on the map do what no king, emperor, or conventional army had ever managed? The answer isn't in any fancy weapon. Isn't in warrior bravery or brilliant maneuvers. Isn't in technology or numbers. The answer's so simple that the Mongols never saw it coming, and that's exactly why it worked. In this video, you'll see how a tiny principality destroyed the greatest military machine in the world using something nobody'd ever tried before. But to understand how this was possible, you first need to understand what the Golden Horde truly was. Forget everything you think you know about medieval cavalry. European knights were heavy, slow, all that armor and brute force. Infantry armies, dense formations, overlapping shields, rows of spears. Systems designed to clash head-on, shield against shield, spear against spear. The Mongol cavalry was none of these things. It was something radically different. It was an army that moved like a weather phenomenon, and it was equally devastating. The Mongols were coming, and they believed that victory was inevitable. They always did. And for 80 consecutive years, they had been right. A Mongol warrior could fire arrows with deadly precision while galloping full speed, not standing still, while moving, at full tilt, horse going flat out. Each warrior carried a composite bow horn, sinew, wood built over years to be lethal. More range, more penetrating power than any English longbow of the era. Effective range, 300 meters. That's 3 football fields. You'd be dead before you even saw them coming. And they didn't fight in static lines. They fought in successive waves. Mongol doctrine was simple. Close in, fire, fall back before contact, repeat. The enemy could never catch them, never regroup. Just slowly bleed out exhausted, disoriented, never even crossing spears with a single Mongol warrior. But the true terror wasn't the bow. It was the feigned retreat. The feigned retreat was the most sophisticated weapon of the medieval era. It worked because enemies always reacted the same way. They chased what looked like a fleeing army. When the Mongols retreated, they looked disorganized, frightened, broken. The enemy saw victory happening right in front of them. They advanced. What else would you do? And then the Mongols would stop, they would wheel around, and they would spring the trap with forces that had been kept hidden on the flanks and in the rear. The enemy who had triumphantly surged forward was now surrounded, exhausted, far from their original defensive position, and died right then and there. This worked against the Russians at the Battle of the Sit River in 1238. It worked against the Poles and Teutonic Knights at Legnica in 1241, where Duke Henry II of Silesia was killed and his army annihilated. It worked against the Hungarians at Mohi in that same year of 1241, where Batu Khan and Subutai destroyed the Hungarian army so completely that King Bela IV was forced to flee from Hungary entirely. It worked in China, in Persia, in the Caucasus, in Anatolia. The Mongols reached the gates of Austria. They reached the shores of the Adriatic Sea. They reached places that no steppe force had ever reached before or would ever reach again. And in every place they arrived on open terrain, they won. Notice the pattern? The entire Mongol doctrine, flanking maneuvers, Feigned retreats, force-multiplying mobility, mounted archers bleeding armies dry from a distance, relied on an assumption so fundamental that no one even questioned it: that the terrain allowed for cavalry movement. It was a perfect machine of conquest, perfectly optimized for the world it was built for. And that flawless optimization made the machine fragile in a way few had realized, and that Gediminas would use to destroy it. But to understand what Gediminas inherited, the world he found when he took power, you need to see what the machine had done 80 years prior. When the Mongol cavalry reached Kiev in December 1240, the city was the heart of a world. Not just a capital, the capital. The seat of what historians call Kievan Rus, the state that had forged a cultural, religious, and political identity for the Eastern Slavs for 300 years. Kiev had tens of thousands of inhabitants, golden churches visible from miles away, and trade routes connecting the Baltic to the Mediterranean along the axis of eastern rivers. Within weeks, nothing was left but ashes and bones. The account passed down to us by Friar Giovanni da Pian del Carpin, a papal envoy who traveled through Kiev a few years after the sack, is barely believable even to those who know the history. He found human skulls and bones blanketing the fields around the city. He found a metropolis that had once housed tens of thousands reduced to no more than 200 homes. He found silence where there once was life. And after Kiev, the horde didn't leave. They stayed. The nightmare didn't end with the sacking. It had just begun. In practice, Mongol rule over the Ruthenian lands meant a system of forced taxation administered through terror. Local princes could keep their titles and courts as long as they paid the required tribute, sent recruits when asked, appeared in person at the Khan's courts when summoned, and never forgot who held the real power. Those who resisted saw their principalities destroyed and their families massacred. Those who collaborated survived, humiliated, impoverished, but alive. For 80 years, this was their world. There was no visible way out, none whatsoever. The Ruthenian principalities were fragmented and weakened, competing with one another for Mongol favor instead of cooperating against their overlords. The Golden Horde controlled the steppe corridor stretching south and east, the logistical heart of Mongol dominance in Eastern Europe. Any serious resistance would require crossing that corridor with a force large enough to face a horde army in open battle. And no one had the resources or the political cohesion to even try. No one, except for a state expanding in the exact direction no one else dared to go. While all the geopolitical logic of the era dictated staying as far away from the horde as possible, a northwestern principality was moving right toward them. Growing, absorbing, systematically advancing into the space the Mongols considered their undisputed domain. Lithuania. Gediminas took power in 1316 as the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and the Lithuania of 1316 was not a state that looked particularly impressive on the European map. It was pagan, a baffling rarity in 14th century Europe, surrounded by Latin Catholics to the west and Orthodox Christians to the east. It was multi-ethnic, blending Baltic Lithuanians with Slavic Ruthenian populations into a political entity that defied all the conventional rules of medieval state-building. It was militarily flexible in a way none of its neighbors could replicate. And that was exactly what made it so dangerous. Other medieval states conquered by destroying. They invaded, pillaged, imposed the conqueror's law, and replaced local structures with their own. It was a model that worked for rapidly consolidating power, but it bred constant resistance among the subjugated populations. Gediminas operated differently. When Lithuania absorbed a Ruthenian principality, it frequently preserved the local political structures, Orthodox faith, nobility, and laws. It made the incorporation palatable. In some cases, the Ruthenian principalities actively sought Lithuanian protection as an alternative to Mongol submission. They weren't conquered, they chose Lithuania over their existing conquerors. It was an expansion strategy that created allies instead of resentful subjects. Compare that to the Golden Horde's model. The Mongol system was rigidly extractive. Taxation, submission, obedience. It worked as long as their coercive power was irresistible and ever-present. But as the horde entered the early 14th century with divided attention, succession disputes among Yoshi's descendants, Eastern pressure from the rise of the Ilkhanate, and internal conflicts over religion and politics, the system began to show cracks. Their grip on the northern Ruthenian principalities relied less on active presence and more on the terrifying reputation they had built back in 1240. Gediminas saw it, not as a modern historian with all the sources, but with the sharp instincts of a leader who knew the geopolitical landscape and the physical terrain. By 1321, the window was wide open. The horde's authority over northern principalities was weakening. Mongol attention was fragmented. Gediminas orchestrated a campaign to pressure Mongol control along the corridor to Kiev. He knew he'd face a Golden Horde force, and he knew he couldn't beat them in open field. Not because his warriors lacked courage, but because out on the open steppe against Mongol cavalry at full doctrine, you don't win. Nobody ever did. 80 years proved that. But there was one place where the rules completely changed. Swamps. I know you came here for epic cavalry charges and dramatic heroism, not a geography lesson. But here's what nobody tells you. The swampland was the secret weapon. The Irpen River rises north of Kiev, flows southeast into the Dnieper. Not a huge river nowhere near the Volga, but in military terms, it was one of the deadliest places on Earth for cavalry. The Irpen Valley's a low-lying floodplain. No sharp riverbanks, just gradients. Ground gets progressively wetter as you approach the channel. Reeds, mud, soggy peat, shallow bogs that look solid from a distance until you step in. During spring thaw, massive stretches flood completely. But even normally, the ground just gives way under heavy weight like that of a horse. A horse weighs 900 to 1,300 pounds. Add an armed warrior, bow, arrows, sword, and gear. It weighs way more. On waterlogged soil, hooves don't grip. They sink. And as they sink, the horse loses leverage, can't push forward, can't turn, can't coordinate with the animals next to it. Multiply that by 20,000 horses, all moving through the same area. A cavalry formation in waterlogged terrain isn't an army. It's chaos. Every single horse fighting just to stay upright. Coordinated movement? Impossible. Just crushed flanks, panicking animals spreading panic, warriors too busy staying mounted to even think about shooting. Here's the nightmare for Mongol doctrine. The flank envelopment, their signature move for generations, needed speed and wide open space. In a swamp, flanks get bogged down, sluggish, completely unable to execute the maneuver. The feigned retreat, their deadliest play, needed cohesion and synchronized movement to turn around and counterattack. Waterlogged terrain, that turns into genuine chaos. You can't wheel in tight formation when every horse is fighting the mud. Mounted archers needed speed, space, distance, mobility. The Irpen swamp had none of that. Just mud. The entire Mongol machine of conquest ran on mobility. And the Irpen Basin completely, systematically robbed that mobility from every single warrior who rode into it in a cavalry formation. This wasn't just some geographical fluke that someone got lucky enough to exploit. It was a weapon specifically and precisely lethal against this exact doctrine of warfare. And Gediminas, who knew the Irpen terrain like the back of his hand, had decided that this was exactly where the battle was going to happen. The only question was how to get 20,000 Mongol warriors to walk right into that trap. Tell me, if you were a Mongol commander marching toward Kiev in 1321, what did you expect? Resistance in the open, maybe some natural defensive line. Defenders trying to form up, protected by choke points at a river or city walls. Then apply pressure, envelop when their line broke, annihilate. You absolutely wouldn't expect to be deliberately led into a swamp. Because no rational commander marches their own army into a swamp. It cripples mobility, everything you've trained for. Any general knows that instinctively. That universal intuition was exactly the blind spot Gediminas exploited. The Lithuanians didn't wait in the open suicide for a smaller army. Instead, they operated near the Irpen, using terrain as both shield and guide. When the Mongols advanced, they found the Lithuanians retreating toward the river. Exactly what it looked like. A smaller army avoiding a fight they'd lose. To Mongol commanders, this created only one logic. A smaller enemy retreats, you pursue. That's the Mongol instinct, the behavior that destroyed armies for generations. When the enemy breaks, you press the attack. This pressure led the horde's cavalry right into the Irpen Valley. As they advanced, the ground shifted. Firmer soil at the basin's edges progressively gave way to waterlogged terrain. Swamps don't telegraph danger. The change is gradual, almost invisible, until suddenly it's not. First, horses sinking might have seemed isolated, just a bad patch to bypass. Then more. Then the entire formation was compromised, too late for reorganization. The Lithuanians, for their part, had chosen their position on defensible ground, terrain firm enough to support warriors fighting on foot, with access to the marshland that flanked and paralyzed the enemy. They didn't need to envelop. They didn't need a numerically superior cavalry of their own. They just needed to hold their ground while the terrain did the heavy lifting. This is what makes Gediminas extraordinary, not as an individual warrior, but as a theater strategist. He didn't try to beat the Mongols at their own game. He created the conditions for victory to happen before the battle even truly began. The battlefield itself was the central strategic decision. Everything else was just execution. And the execution was about to begin. The first horses entered the marsh and didn't come out the way they went in. It was gradual. Terrifying precisely because it was gradual. The advance, which had been disciplined, began to lose cohesion when the ground gave way beneath the front lines of the formation. Horses, stepping with the weight and rhythm of an army on the move, met unexpected resistance. Some sank up to their knees. Others stumbled and tried to overcompensate with sudden movements that threw their riders off balance. Those that tried to maintain speed to overcome the lack of traction created exactly the kind of explosive, uncoordinated movement that increased the risk of falling, and the panic spread from animal to animal, infecting the entire formation in an uncontrollable chain reaction. For a Mongol archer, the horse wasn't equipment. It was an extension of themselves. Childhood horsemanship created symbiosis warrior and mount as one tactical unit, coordinating and reacting together. That unity let them shoot accurately at full gallop. But when the horse panics, the system collapses. The archer fighting to stay mounted can't shoot. The Mongol secret weapon, that perfect warrior-horse unity, destroyed. Not by another army, by the mud. The flanks tried the envelopment that destroyed armies for generations. The terrain crushed them before they could even position. The Irpen Valley offered no fast alternative routes. The swamp was too extensive. Commanders ordered flank reorganization. Warriors couldn't respond with the speed doctrine demanded. The orders came. The intention was clear. But the terrain refused to obey. The feigned retreat was attempted. Had to be trained reflex, the automatic move when things go wrong. But a feigned retreat in the Irpen mud wasn't controlled. Horses moving backward in mud where they're already sinking don't pivot gracefully. They stumble, collide, create the exact chaos the Mongols used to destroy disorganized enemies. Now it was their chaos. The feigned retreat became real. Real became rout. Rout became slaughter. The Lithuanians attacked from their positions. Tell me if you were that Mongol warrior, trained since childhood. 20 victories, best horseman on the steppe, and your horse just stopped obeying? What do? No answer. No training prepared them for this. The Lithuanian infantry just managed the disaster. Targets couldn't move, couldn't scatter, couldn't regroup, densely packed, helpless, making every arrow count. 20,000 warriors, the force that reduced Kiev to bones in 1240. The doctrine that swept Poland to China. The cavalry no conventional army stopped in open field for a generation, dying in marshlands of a modest river because one man understood: terrain is a weapon. The scale of the destruction was what changed history. A 20,000-strong horde force wasn't just an army. It was a statement of power, proof they could mobilize, deploy, project force anywhere. Its destruction sent the opposite message: not invulnerable. There was a condition-specific, replicable, where the machine stops. When the battle ended, Gediminas turned his army toward Kiev. Kiev in 1321 was a shadow of itself. 80 years of Mongol rule, the 1240 sack, extractive taxation, skilled people fleeing, trade declining transformed Eastern Europe's richest city into a husk. Fraction of the population. Great churches partially survived, but the city around them had withered. Local structures only existed as horde control tools. Mongol authority over Kiev rested on their capacity to project punitive force. That capacity just got destroyed at Irpen. Gediminas didn't need a siege. Political authority in Kiev faced reality. The force defending Mongol control was annihilated miles away. No reinforcements coming. No second line of defense. Just Gediminas advancing with an army that did the impossible. and that reputation reached Kiev first. The city opened its gates. Gediminas installed Lithuanian authority: no destruction, no sacking. His expansion pattern: incorporation, not devastation. Preservation, not replacement. Kiev got a different administrator with different logic, one who needed the city to function, not just bleed it. Historically, Irpen and Kiev represented the 14th century's biggest geopolitical shift in Eastern Europe. For 80 years, Kiev belonged to the Mongol world, conquered, controlled, foreign. After Irpen, it belonged to Lithuania, never returned to the Horde. But there was one question any rational observer would ask upon contemplating what had just occurred. Where was the Golden Horde's response? A force of 20,000 men had been destroyed. A strategic city had been torn from its sphere of influence. Where was the retaliation? The Golden Horde didn't come back. Not because they didn't want to. And not because they were small or militarily weak in absolute terms. The Khanate was still a formidable power in 1321, capable of mobilizing massive armies and projecting force over vast expanses of territory. The reason is more fundamental than that. Force projection is always conditional. It depends on internal cohesion, available resources, no competing threats, political consensus. In 1321, these were devastating for the Horde's reputation. Uzbeg Khan, ruling 1313-1341, was competent and expanded territory. But the Horde wasn't monolithic. It was steppe clans with diverging interests, tensions over Islam conversion, succession disputes, power struggles. Any major defeat could ignite everything. Irpen was exactly that. Major defeat, humiliating, inexplicable by the logic that sustained Mongol power for generations. Mounting a punitive campaign against Lithuania required consensus, resources, attention the Horde couldn't spare without compromising other fronts. And Lithuania just proved it could destroy Horde forces on chosen terrain. A poorly planned punitive campaign could end the same way, annihilated. Lithuania kept expanding eastward, not dramatic leaps, but systematically, principality by principality in the decades after Irpen. The Horde, the force that reduced Kiev to bones in weeks, just watched. Paralyzed by the vulnerability Irpen revealed. Absolute strength becomes absolute impotence when conditions go wrong. The pattern established in 1321 Lithuanian expansion was viable, proved right repeatedly. And the Horde. Great fragmentation came in the 1360s, 1380s, when succession disputes and external pressure shattered it into rival factions, fighting each other harder than external threats. What seemed monolithic and eternal became warring realms. Their power over Ruthenian lands simply evaporated as the 14th century went on. Gediminas struck the right window. Not the widest, most comfortable, or obvious one, the right one. And that window, the following decades showed, was briefer than anyone knew when Mongol cavalry entered the Irpen marshland. The swamp. I know seems too simple to be the answer to something so massive. That's exactly the lesson. Irpen in 1321 wasn't a miracle, wasn't supernatural heroism defying logic, wasn't luck from a rainy day. It was careful, deliberate application of something few understood about the Mongol machine, how it worked and where it didn't. The entire Mongol doctrine envelopment, feigned retreats, mounted archers, flanking speed was built on one assumption: terrain allowing cavalry movement. So fundamental nobody questioned it. No contingencies for when terrain refused. The system was so optimized for where it worked that it created complete vulnerability everywhere it didn't. Gediminas identified the vulnerability. Instead of matching the Horde with more soldiers or weapons resources, Lithuania didn't have he used terrain as force multiplier. The Irpen wasn't just where the battle happened. It was the primary weapon. The most important decision was choosing where to fight. Other Mongol defeats follow the same pattern. Ain-Jalut in 1260. Mamluks defeated Mongols on carefully selected terrain the Mongols didn't know. Vietnamese resistance in the 1280s? Dense jungle, swamps, rivers, neutralizing steppe cavalry. The Japanese survived because coastal and maritime terrain was fundamentally incompatible with steppe tactics. The pattern's consistent across continents and centuries. Can't beat them at their game? Change the game. Opponent's strength depends on specific conditions? Destroy those conditions first. This isn't just medieval history. It's asymmetric competition fundamentals. Don't face a superior opponent where they're strongest. Force them where they're weakest, and you need to understand the true nature of their strength, not just their reputation. Gediminas understood the Mongols' absolute irresistible strength. Their cavalry was actually highly specific, conditional on particular terrain and conditions. Destroy those conditions, and you destroy their strength, even without matching their numbers. 20,000 warriors died in marshland because one man understood this better than all of them. Tell me in the comments, if you were a Mongol commander advancing on the Irpen in 1321, what would you have done differently? Leave your answer below. And if this kind of history interests you, subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more to come.